Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's Journaling for Self-Care. Before I get into what I'm going to do this week, I just want to briefly talk through the different glues that I use and how I use them, because I had a question under my latest video over on Kofi from somebody, and I thought maybe there are others that are wondering and haven't dared to ask or whatever. Now different people use different glues in different ways, so this is just how I use them. The basic thing to start with is a glue stick, which I think we all know, and I use that if it's thin paper or something like to temporarily tack pieces of cloth together if I then want to stitch through them, when journaling. Some are stronger than others. I have this one, Yoo-Hoo, which is quite a famous brand, and I've got this other one that was given to me that's, I don't know what brand that is, Q Connect or something. Q Connect, which works perfectly well as well, so people have their favourites. So that's a basic glue stick. That's quite dry as a glue, so it doesn't put a lot of water into the surface and it dries quickly, but it's not as strong as some other glues. So they've all got their pros and cons. The other thing I use as a glue, although technically it's a medium, is this, and I have it some decanted into a little pot because I buy it by the big. I think this is the only one I've ever bought actually, and this is Liquitex. There are other brands, but this is really for mixing with paint to make the paint more transparent, but it also can be used as a glue and also as a sealer over a collage or some other kind of work, to give a sort of matte glaze effect, if that's not an oxymoron to say matte glaze. No, I don't think it is. So that's that. You can get generic brands as well, much cheaper, and that's very runny. That's like about the texture of runny cream, I suppose. And then at the other end of the scale with the mediums, you can also get gloss in all of these. I just prefer the matte look. Is this? It was Heavy Gel Matte Medium by Golden, which is another big brand, which I bought for a workshop years ago, and that's very, very thick. And I have diluted it. I've mixed those two together. So I've put some of this very runny pouring medium into this, so that it's sort of a medium, as I keep joking. But you use that in exactly the same way as the pouring medium, but it's much thicker. So this is good. I use it for gluing, like thicker bits of card or cloth onto things. It's really strong, and I think that's why it was recommended for the workshop that I did. It's actually for my granny's book, if you saw that, the workshop I did with Kate Thompson online via her website. So that's a Heavy Gel Matte Medium. So they're kind of designed as a medium to mix with acrylic paint, but they're commonly used as an adhesive or as a sealer, and there's matte or gloss. So those are the mediums. The other kinds of glue that I use is good old Mod Podge. This is decanted into a jar, but this is gloss. The basic Mod Podge is quite shiny, and I find if I use it as a sealer, number one, it's shiny, which I'm not a fan of, but number two, it stays a bit tacky for forever, or for as long as I've done that. So I tend to only use it as a glue. I think I bought it for the children years ago. I've got a great big pot of it, but apparently you can also get a matte Mod Podge, and I think it depends on the climate how it dries. I've heard people say that if they live in a hot, dry climate, then it's fine. It's just if you live somewhere damper, I don't know. But basically Mod Podge, I think, is just PVA, so it's like your Elmer's school glue or that kind of thing. And then the other glues that I use are just a PVA, which I haven't got out. Don't know where it's gone, but just a PVA in a little bottle. The bottle looks exactly like this, except it's got a different label on. And that, because it's got a little fine tip applicator, is good. Like, for example, say you wanted to make a pocket in your journal, you can just do a fine bead of that glue all around the edge of the pocket, just to keep it, a narrow strip of glue. And this one, so that's basic PVA. a lot of people use something called art glitter glue, which doesn't have glitter in it, but it's got a very fine nozzle, but I've never used that. This one is, I think it's the same as something I see used a lot called Fabri-Tac, and this is a solvent-based glue. So I would use this, for example, if I wanted to stick a little metal element onto the cover of a journal, you know, like the real tough jobs. So I use that very sparingly because it's really smelly. It's solvent-based, like I said. So those are basically all the different glues I use, so I hope that's helpful. And then the other thing I was asked about was gesso, which I use a lot. And white gesso is a primer. It's made to prime a surface for painting on. So if you buy those artist canvases, you know, stretched over a wooden frame, they're already primed with gesso, ready to paint on usually. It's chalk based. These days it does have acrylic in as well, although traditionally it wouldn't have had. I don't think. I'm just trying to see the ingredients. I'm pretty sure it's got acrylic in it. But it dries very, very matte. As here on page 1 of my journal, this was gesso. See, it's got absolutely no shine to it at all. And also you can water it down so that it's quite a bit transparent, and I just love the, you know, the texture of it that it gives to the page. And then it's lovely then to work over the top of, rather than a white acrylic paint that doesn't, you know, you can't really watercolour over it or things like that. Gesso will react if you put water on it afterwards. You have to experiment a bit, but yeah, I just prefer it to using a white acrylic paint on the whole. But I basically use it as a paint rather than a primer. I also used it I used it here over the top of the background of this page, and I used it here over the book page. So if you didn't watch last week, you can see that I've used it quite sparingly and thin, so it gives a sort of chalky finish to the surface. And then this exactly the same but different colour as this. I thought I was getting 100 millilitres. And then this came, it's 1,000 millilitres, which is 33.81 ounces if you prefer old money. This is black gesso. And again, this is exactly the same as a white gesso, only it's black. And it dries very matte. Again, this is what I used when we did the wolf on the tree here. And I also used it on the cover of this journal. All this black is gesso. I did then put a coat of matte medium over the top, so it's made it slightly shinier, because I wanted to protect all the, you know, this was tissue that I used for the flowers. So that's basically what I use in terms of gloopy stuff. So I hope that's helpful to those of you who don't know all that. But I didn't know until I didn't go out and buy all of that in one go when I decided to do mixed media. I think I started just with a PVA. In fact, I know I did, and I think at one point then I got the white gesso because I saw other people using it, and then I, you know, gradually, as I did a couple of online courses to learn more, I bought the supply list. But so I would recommend it rather than going out, because it's not cheap, this stuff, rather than going out and buying all the stuff. You can basically start mixed media with a glue stick. That's all you need to start with. And then maybe get yourself something, you know, a PVA, a wet glue as well, and go from there, and then see as you go on, you know. That would be my advice, rather than to just go and buy a load of stuff that you won't use. So I hope that was helpful. So this week, what are we going to do, Catherine? I hear you asking. Stop whittering on about glue and gesso. Well, I'm going to have a sip of my tea for a start. Sorry about that. And move all these pots to one side and jars before I knock them over. So this week I've still been reading The Women Who Run with the Wolves, which inspired last week's spread about weaving a cloak, in a sense, and it certainly inspired the wolf and the moon spread. And I'm going to take as my inspiration the story of Vasilisa and the Baba Yaga, and I'll tell a little bit the outlines of the story as I'm working, for those of you who don't know. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a kind of a collage, a woman in collage, and then there'll be elements added to that will kind of tell the story of the Vasilisa. And I did think about actually being brave and drawing a woman, but actually there's so many other things I want to add. I think it would just take too long, and yeah, so I'm not going to do that this week. I'm going to stick a photo, not a photo, an image on. So I got this image from, this is from an old book called The Girl's Own Papers, of this woman, and I've chosen her because I like the way she's looking. Now she's looking that way. I could go and photocopy her, you know, and reverse her, but I think I'm happy with her looking sort of backwards, if you like. I'm going to work on this page only with my collage, and then this page I'm just going to use for my words, I think, because I'm getting to the end of this signature, so the gutter's quite deep to work it as a spread. So I'm going to cut her out and put her there, and then I'm going to extend her gown. And if you look at this eco print, there's kind of a much whiter shape here that I'm using. I mean, obviously you won't have this, even if you've got eco print, it won't be exactly the same shape as mine. But just, you know, if you've got a pattern paper of some kind, then use what's there. If you don't have a pattern paper, maybe if you've got watercolour paints or something, you could just sketch in, you know, just wash in, is that the correct term? Some kind of background and just leave a shape, or you could go afterwards and paint or whatever. Anyway, I'm going to cut her out for starters. So I'm just going to cut out, I'm going to leave this square because I'm going to collage there anyway. I'm going to cut out just around her gown and her face and her hair. And while I do that, I will tell you the story of Vasilisa and the Baba Yaga. I'm not going to tell it word for word and every bit of it, but just the vague. Sorry, I'm just looking where the gown ends and the background begins. So Vasilisa is a young woman who lives with her. No, back up the train, Catherine. I'm saying back. I get that phrase "back up the train" from Jerry Bellini. She says it. Those of you who watch Jerry on her channel here on YouTube. No, Vasilisa is orphaned, and before her mother passes away she gives her a doll which is dressed in the same clothes as Vasilisa herself. And then Vasilisa and her father, after a period of time, her father remarries a widow with 2 daughters. Very much shades of Cinderella in the story. And the widow and the 2 daughters are, you know, it's the wicked stepmother and the wicked stepdaughters of the Cinderella story. They basically treat Vasilisa like a slave, and they're very envious of her beauty and her innocence and her kindness and her niceness. And so one day, in order to try and get rid of her, they put the fire out deliberately in their house, and then they send Vasilisa into the woods to get fire from the Baba Yaga, who is an old woman who lives in the woods. So Vasilisa sets off into the woods, and she's afraid, of course she is, because the woods are dark, you know, as they often are in fairy stories, and scary. And she has the doll, but she has her doll in her pocket, the doll that her mother gave her. And when she needs to know which way to go, the doll tells her. So she'll say to the doll, shall I go right or left? And you know, the doll tells her which way to go, and if she's afraid, the doll comforts her, and so forth. So I'm just being a bit careful not to cut off her nose. This paper is quite brittle. So finally she gets to the Baba Yaga, and the Baba Yaga starts to ask her a series of questions, and guided by the doll, Vasilisa gives the correct answers so as not to enrage the Baba Yaga. And eventually she asks for, you know, she says why she's come, and she asks for the fire. And so the Baba Yaga says, well, I'm not giving you fire just like that, and she gives her various tasks to do, sort of household tasks, but then also, you know, like those sort of labour tasks that you get asked in these fairy stories, to sort mouldy corn from the good corn. That was one night, and then the next night was to sort poppy seeds, millions of poppy seeds from a mountain of dirt. So, you know, on the face of it, impossible tasks. But of course, with the help of the doll, Vasilisa manages to complete these tasks, and the Baba Yaga gives her the fire, on a stick inside a skull. And Baba Yaga finds her way back through the forest to the home where her stepmother and stepsisters are waiting, who think she's long gone because, you know, she's been gone for days, so they think their plan has worked and the Baba Yaga has finished her off. And so Vasilisa returns with the fire, and the fiery skull puts an end to the stepmother and the stepdaughters. And that's the end of the story. So and there's my woman cut out. And she looks very nice against that page, I do think. But the meaning of the story, if you don't know the book, Women Who Run With the Wolves, she tells these stories and then she talks about the meaning in the stories, you know. So the doll represents Vasilisa's intuition, so therefore our women's intuition, and how it guides us, and how it's deep inside us and we need to trust it. And even if we think we've lost it, we haven't, it's still in there. And that story really spoke to me a lot. I'm just going to have another sip of my tea before it's stone cold. About trusting my own intuition and my own instincts, because I kind of had the feeling that I'd lost it somewhere along the way. So it was very reassuring, and, you know, I'm rediscovering to trust myself now that I'm solely responsible for making decisions, you know, about my life and so on. Learning to trust myself again. So this is why I wanted to do this spread. This is, you know, how it relates to me and self-care and so on. So that's my thinking behind it. So I'm going to glue her on. Before I do, I'm just going, because I want to extend this gown. I want her to have a big gown coming out, possibly out of proportion to her head. I don't really mind. So I'm just looking at the lines I've got here. I'm just thinking whereabouts to position her. I'm just having a little play. I want, she kind of goes nicely there, but is that enough of a gown? Because I want to put a pocket and create a little doll to go in the pocket. So I'm thinking in advance about where I might place that. I think I will put her slightly higher up. Maybe just over to that side like that. And then the pocket can go somewhere down here. Let's do that. So I'm going to use, which glue am I going to use? Probably because it's so thin I can get away with the glue stick, but it's quite a big area. So I think I maybe use the Mod Podge. Maybe use the Mod Podge, which I will, it's a bit big for the glue book. I'll just do it on here and be careful. Actually, I'll do it on some scrap. Let me find some scrap. There we go, use this bit of greaseproof. Otherwise, if I do it on here, I'll get Mod Podge on there and then I'll put my journal on top of it. I know myself. And I've got an old brush. I can't now remember where I said I was going to put her. What I often do is just make a little mark with a pencil. I might put the light, excuse me, I might put the light on, it's gone a bit dark. Sorry if that changes the lighting. So I wanted her sort of there. I'll just put a little line here on this corner and that'll be probably, or maybe this corner, enough to tell me where I want her. Because when it's all covered in glue it's difficult to, you know, mess about with it, isn't it? You do have to be careful a little bit with very wet glues if you've got very thin paper, because it can make it very fragile or rumply or whatever. In that case then you want a very thin coat, or consider using your glue stick, or, you know, a glue that's less wet. I've learnt by doing, basically. I think that's the best way to learn often. I mean, you can obviously watch other people, see what they do and, you know, get ideas, but it's always how it works for you with your stuff and your techniques. And I found out that also if you put wet glue on one side of a page, I discovered that really through bookmaking. The paper can bow. This is watercolour paper, so this is quite sturdy paper, but it can make the paper all bow up. But then if you put wet medium on the other side, then, like for example in this book, if you made one page very wet one week, and then the next week you put your, wet the other side with paint or glue, it pulls it back again. And that's when you do bookmaking, why you often press things under a weight so that doesn't bow. Like for example, if you glue on a cover, it sucks the paper one way, and then you need to either squash it back or suck it back the other way by putting wet medium on the other side. Right, I'm just going to run over her gently with a credit card. I'm going to put this over to protect her, just to make sure she's well stuck. I always put a bit of paper over to protect, because in the past I've done that, and because the image underneath is wet, it's torn. So there we go. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do, well, I did think of putting some kind of flower on her, in her hair. And I had this, I photocopied this from this book, which I think I've shown you before, Mr. Marshall's Flower Book, which is a modern book of all these beautiful botanical illustrations. And this is the Rose of York and Lancaster. So it's got the white rose of York, the red rose of Lancaster, which my family's from Yorkshire and I was born in Lancashire. And I'm just wondering if I want to put that in her hair. Maybe I do. So I'll go ahead and cut that out. I'll probably edit that, edit out me cutting, because I think this is already quite long before I've even really started. Okay, I've done that. That was a little bit of fiddling about because the rose was way too big. So here are little bits that I cut off, and all I did was I just started trimming a petal at a time and offering it up, and so I sort of wanted it to frame her hair. So I ended up cutting these 3 little bits off, and now I think it sort of flows this way and she's looking that way. I just like the movement of it. So, don't be afraid to modify things if they don't suit. So now I'm going to just draw myself a couple of guidelines just to give the impression of this robe going on. So I'm going to just follow the line of her shoulder here, try and keep my head out of your way. I'm just going to draw just a little pencil line, just until I reach the next page. I'm not going for realism here, or scale, or perspective, or anything. It's just, I just want the impression of a flowing robe. And here again, I'm just going to follow this natural curve. And maybe follow a little bit the line of the in the eco print. Again, just till I hit the edge of the page. Just hold it up so that I can see if it's pleasing to me. Yes. So all this will be her cloak, her cape, her dress, her gown, whatever you want to call it. And I did want to add another element to it. I'm just thinking about where to add that relates to the words that I'll share with you. Now the words I'm going to use come from another book, a lovely book that I've just received from a lovely person who sent it to me. I really wanted to incorporate an element of it, so I'm just having a think. Sorry to be cryptic. All will be revealed. So I'm just thinking I'll probably put my pocket here somewhere in this corner for my little doll. Yeah, well, let's just go for it. So basically I want to, those of you who were here last year for the Slow Stitch journal, remember Kintsugi, when we looked at Kintsugi, which is the Japanese art of mending using gold to celebrate the mend. And there's some words I want to use that kind of reference that. So what I want to do is almost create a Kintsugi mend in her dress, which I will later on paint gold with the gold paint that lovely Amy sent me. I think was it Amy? Yes, I'm pretty sure it was Amy. So I want to leave a channel. So I'm just trying to imagine where. So if my pocket's here, Maybe, I'm not sure I want to cross this with my channel, that's my problem, because then you'll see that probably I'm overthinking. No, I'm going to cross that, and I can always stick some paper or something over it, because I just think it should be almost like a sash, you know, so it almost looks like a sash. So I don't want to collage where that's going. So I'm just going to give myself a guideline. I don't want to have it very wide, maybe about ½ an inch wide. Whoops. Like that. That'll do, pig. And I think I will just stick a strip of white paper on it so that it ends up behind the collage. This is me thinking ahead. Sometimes I think ahead, sometimes I don't. Trying to find a bit of white paper laying around the place. And this isn't white, it's cream, but it will just about do. There's my ruler. Not there. Oh. Don't you just hate that when you put your hand where you expect something to be and it's not there? And you know why? Because it's in the cutlery tray that I use for all those bits and bobs, and the cutlery tray was the other way around, so it was the other side. That makes sense. So if I go across the diagonal, it'll be long enough. Clock's chiming. There you go. I'm saying there you go because Park Home Life on Friday, after I stopped filming, I was aware that it was just before the clock chimed 10. And I know many of you like to hear the clock chiming. So I felt a little bit like I might be cheating you out of hearing the clock chime. Of course, I don't really want my line to be dead straight, do I? I'm going to tear it just like this, and not with the ruler that I went to great pains to find. Because it doesn't matter. As long as it covers the thing, I don't mind if it extends past it, if that makes sense. So I can just tear that end off. And if you've got white paper already, you don't need to do this. And if you don't have this, or if this doesn't bother you showing through the paint, that will do like that. I just wanted something flat and all the same colour, so that later on when I paint it white with my when I paint it gold, the gold line will be clean. You know what I mean. I'm also, I think, going to have a go with that gold foil that I showed you. I can't remember when, because quite a few people said, because I was aware that you had to get special stuff, or you're supposed to use special stuff. I think it's gum arabic. And quite a few people said, including Marion, lovely Marion on Marion's World, that they had had some success just using glue stick. So I'm going to give that a go. It's trimming off a bit there now. Right, there. So that's just a background for later. So all I'm going to do now is unearth all my collage stuff. And what I did was I went in my collage papers, my shoebox, and I pulled out, excuse me, I think I pulled out this first. This came in a little package that someone sent me recently. And then this kind of informed the colour choices of the other things I made. And I also must have had in my mind that I was going to use this rose as well. So I'm just going to collage her gown. I'm not sure if I'm going to completely cover it up here or leave some of that showing. I'll see as I go along. But I'm going to collage her gown everywhere, just with torn up bits of paper. I'm going to cover the edges of this, but I'm going to leave a little channel. And when I've done all that, I'll be back, because that's going to take me some time, and I think we're already up to half an hour. and all I've done is stick 3 bits of paper on my page basically. So I'll be back in a little while. Okay, I finished my collage of her dress. I'm going to do her pocket down here somewhere, and now I've got this lovely gold paint that Amy sent me, which is Fine Tech, and a paintbrush and some water, because I'm pretty sure it's watercolour. Doesn't say. But anyway, I had a little practice on here and it seems to work okay. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I've got my little wedge-shaped brush and paint in, you see this jaggedy Kintsugi type line, and my head's going to come in the way. So I'm going to go away and do that, and then while that's drying, when I've done that, I'll come back and talk about the pocket and the little doll. Look at that, and that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Amy, that's wonderful. So now I'm going to let all that dry completely. Oh sorry, I just head-butted you because I'm standing up. I'll sit down. And while that's drying, I'm going to go and work on the pocket and the little doll, and then I need my words obviously to go on there, so I shall set that to one side. I will have a play with the gold foil as well, but I want to play first on, you know, some scrap paper. Sorry, this is not very nice to look at, this messy background. So I've cut a shape out of some tea-dyed paper, it's just sketchbook paper, and I want to, and I've chomped I've got one of these thingies, you know, that chomps the corners. If you wanted to do that and you didn't have a corner chomper, I think the children bought me that a couple of Christmases ago, you just get something round and draw around it and cut it, and then the little piece that you cut off, you can use it as a template so that the other one's the same. That's how I used to do it before I got that thing. Actually, I don't think I've chomped those evenly. Have I used a different one for each side? I always turn them upside down because then it's easier to see. I think I've used a different one. Better. Yeah, that's better. So I've torn, I want to decorate it with this serviette napkin, so I can't put glue on that and it's hard to cut, so I think what I'm going to do, I've torn this piece bigger, I'm going to put the glue on here, Mod Podge, since I'm using Mod Podge, and then stick the napkin on, let it dry completely and then trim it afterwards. So I'm going to do that, let everything dry, and you obviously won't have to wait at all, but then I'll be back to show you how I'm going to do the doll, the Intuition doll. Okay, so here's my pocket all dry and trimmed back, and I trimmed round on 3 sides, sorry, but then across the top I folded it down, the excess, and just glued it. Actually that's still a bit wet, I just used glue stick. Just, you know, to trim the top of the pocket, and I expect I might ink it when it's completely dry, but for now all I need it for is I've just created this template to make my doll, and how I did that was I got just a rough piece of scrap paper that was slightly smaller than my pocket, so maybe, because you need to be able to stick down the edge of your pocket and still fit your doll in, so I think I went maybe sort of ½ an inch narrower, and then decided how tall I wanted her, so the bottom of the pocket will be glued a bit, so if you just want her head peeping out, you know, just guesstimate and get your piece of paper kind of the right size, and then I folded it in half like that, and then I got a pencil and I just drew this kind of very rudimentary doll shape like that. So, you know, I drew a round shape or a semi-round shape for the head. I made sure not to come in too much for the neck because it would make it too fragile. And then I curved out again, and then again down to a sort of rounded point so it wasn't too pointy. That's slightly smaller than this one. And then I just cut it out, you know how to cut out. And then I shall use that, I seem to be cutting it out anyway. She's a bit narrower than the other one. But this one I think is, you know, a good size. So I think it's best to just do that on some scrap paper, and then I can use this as a template because I want her to have a bit more substance. So I'm going to find a bit of maybe cardstock or something like that, and then I'm going to I think I might draw her and colour her in with pencil, or I might do a bit of collage, I'm not sure yet. So I'll go and have a play with that, and I'll come back and talk. Okay, I've finished my pocket. So I stuck a little bit of rickrack across the top there, and I found these words in my found text tin, you know, torn from magazines. And it says, the key to unlocking your potential within. So I thought that was appropriate. And my little doll, I've cut her out of some brown cardstock, and I don't know if you can see, but I've drawn vaguely her face and her hair and where her blouse and her apron, and a little shape at the bottom for her boots, because she's described in the story as having red boots, a black skirt, a white apron, and an embroidered blouse. That's not easy to say. So I'm going to do a combination of paint and collage on her, and maybe a little bit of lace for her apron, but I'll do that in a minute. Before I do that, I just want to show you quickly, I've got this gold foil. I had an experiment with the glue stick on this bit of white paper, and it worked fine, look. So I'm going to just do some little patches here and there, just on her dress, I think, just for fun, just because, you know, gold. Well, you'll see when I show you my words at the end, as well as this gold. So all I did was just put a tiny thin smear in a kind of random patch, try and remember vaguely where I put it, and then I left it for just a few seconds so it wasn't completely wet, and then I got a little bit of the gold and put it on it. I hope it was there. Just pushed it with my finger a little bit, and then, sorry if my head's coming in, and then I just got this very soft, clean paintbrush, clean and dry, and then I just sort of pushed at it. Maybe it's best to just wait until it's completely dry. And I just sort of pushed at it so that the bits that weren't stuck come off. Just like that. And it's probably better, like I said, to let it dry completely, because I kind of want that distressed look, just like little highlights. So, you know, that's probably like literally like watching paint dry to watch me do that, but just to say that does work with the glue stick. Thank you all those who suggested it. It's still a bit tacky there. So yeah, I think the key is to put the tiniest hint of glue stick on, save those bits, precious gold, and let it just go tacky, then do your gold, then put your gold on, and then let it dry completely, and then work at it with the brush. So I shall do that off camera so you don't have to watch me, but I'm just going to put little highlights here and there in her collage. But before I go away and do that, I'm going to close that back safely up in case Fred comes marauding. And before I do that, I'm just going to paint my little doll, and then she can have time to dry while I do that. So I put that book over there, excuse me. I use this bit of white paper so you can see, because otherwise it's brown on brown. So I'm going to paint her skirt completely, including, can you see my pencil lines? I've drawn a line to indicate an apron, but I'm thinking I might use some of this broderie anglaise as an apron. So I'm just going to paint that whole area black, her shoes red, her body, her blouse. I got this tiny little, I think it was a Persian rug or something, you know, a picture in a magazine. I thought I might stick that on for her blouse, but I'll do that after I've painted. And then her face I think I'll just do with colouring pencils maybe, and maybe her hair I'll paint a kind of dark blonde / brown colour. So I'll go ahead and do my painting. Let's find a brush, find some water. You can obviously, if you make little dolls like this, decorate them in any way you like, but I'm just bearing in mind that I need to slot her into the pocket. Where's my rag now? You can't I'll need my palette. I'll just work directly off the pans. But I did have a rag. There it is. I did have a rag, and I still have a rag. So what colours did I say? So I might start with her little red shoes. So I'll just use alizarin crimson. I don't know how it's going to show up on this dark brown paper or brown paper. Well, we shall see. You can always go over it with colouring pencil. I think it shows up well enough. A bit wet. So that's her red boots. I did try, by the way, I know I keep talking about trying with the tripod. I did try, but it wasn't handy. I don't think you would see any better. It's not completely even, but it's good enough, I think. It's better. So that's her little red boots. So I should let that dry. I'll go and do her hair, and then I'll come back and do her black skirt afterwards, because if I go now with the black, it'll blend with the red. So I'll do her hair. What colour shall I do her hair? Maybe yellow ochre with a tiny bit of raw umber. And I'm just going to mix it on my pans because I don't mind. I'll just try it on there. Probably maybe slightly browner, because otherwise it's the same colour as her face. Maybe more raw umber with a bit of yellow ochre. And we'll try. You can always paint over it. She's so tiny. I haven't stuck anything on the back, but I guess you could do the back as well if you wanted to. You could do her double-sided. I remember making these some time ago and helping my daughter make one, and she did her with a sad face on one side and a happy face on the other side. Not painted in cardboard, but we made little cloth ones, and I gave some away to friends. I think it was when I first read the book, actually, thinking about it. Like little spirit dolls. It's quite handy that she's cut out already. Well, I guess you could have painted her first and then cut her out. But if you just put scrap paper behind her, you can just paint straight off the edge. There we go, and then move her. So that's her hair and her boots done. Let's do her black skirt. I have got ivory black and lamp black. Lamp black is kind of a blacker black. I mostly use ivory black. I don't know why. I don't think I've used the lamp black at all. It looks new. Right, so I don't need to be too careful on this edge because I'm going to collage, but oh, that's really too wet. Be careful when it's anything but watercolour paper or mixed media paper because it can buckle. Well, it's quite sturdy paper, but still. I've got a cat, I think it's called a cat's tongue brush, this one. Really up on all the technical terms. Slowly learning, watching other people. I'm sure my head's in the way. For which many apologies. Now her face is so tiny, and I'm sure I don't have the skill with a paintbrush, so I'm definitely going to do her face with crayon, pencil crayon. Once she's completely dry. So I'll finish painting her black and let her dry and colour her face in, do my gold leaf, and then I'll come back for the finishing touches. Hope that's okay. And the words for the other side, and to tell you about the other book, yes, don't forget. Okay, so I've done my gold leaf in. Really pleased with how that's turned out. It's just little highlights. And here's my little doll. Just put that to one side for a minute. So I painted her and I let the paint dry, and then so I'm covered in gold. And then I cut my template up to get the shape for the blouse, and then use that to cut the shape out of the little bit of magazine paper, which has also got gold on. So I'm going to stick that on there. I'll just use the glue stick. Should be fine, it's only thin paper. Whoops, that's a bit too much glue stick. I haven't done anything on the back, but like I say, you could if you wanted to. See, her back's just plain. But you could draw, you know, the back of her hair and the back of all her clothes and everything. Let's get this somewhat straight. You probably can't see, I shall show you in a mo. Ugh, there we go, I've got glue all over my fingers. So that's her little blouse. And I actually made her a little apron out of a tiny bit of lace and a bit of rickrack, which I stitched on with tiny stitches. I just folded the lace over. And I'm going to glue it on. I think I'm going to glue it completely down because of her getting in and out, getting her in and out of the pocket. Just wondering what to glue it with. Probably the glue stick will be okay, she said. Not very sure. We'll give it a try. If it comes off, we can always then glue it with something different. Not the handiest thing to put glue stick onto cloth, but oops, come here. Back up there where they can see you. So this, probably now you can only see my head. This rickrack, get it somewhat central, Catherine, will kind of bend. So what I'm hoping is I can just follow the curve of her blouse a little bit like that. That's good enough, isn't it? So there's my little doll. So we just need her to dry before we can put her in the pocket. But like I said, I had these words from my found text tin, and the other quote that I want to put on the facing page, so I'm just going to check, sorry about my creaky chair, are from this book, which is called The Book of Healing by, I'm probably going to mispronounce her name, Najwa Zebian, and it's selected poetry and prose, and it's beautiful. It was just sent to me recently by Julie. Thank you so much, Julie. And I've chosen these words from the chapter which is called Rebuilding Yourself. I won't say the rest in case it triggers anybody, but rebuilding yourself is the positive side of it. From the ashes I rose, and I stitched the pieces of my soul back together with gold. So I have stamped them onto this bit of tea-dyed paper, and I could stick them in one big lump like that, but I think that's not really, I don't really like that, so I think I'm going to tear them up. I was in two minds. So I think I shall tear them into sections and, you know, space them out a bit. So excuse me tearing, and then of course I'll have to ink them, but it'll all give time for my dolly to dry. And I use my old stamp set that's super wonky, that's a mixture of lowercase and uppercase. Don't ask me why. There's no A, so I have to use a V upside down and then draw in the little crossbar with a pen afterwards. But they're slightly smaller than the ones the children got me for Christmas. It's nice to have two sizes. So yeah, I kind of like that when I was thinking about what to do this week, I had the Vasilisa in my mind because I'd recently read that, and the idea of making a pocket with a doll. But then it kind of extended when I got the Book of Healing, and I read the quote about the gold and the kind of the mending and stitching. Made me think of the Kintsugi, yeah, and it sort of all came together really. Quite late on in the proceedings. I usually start sometime, you know, Tuesday or Wednesday even after I've done the previous week's one. Often my mind starts working on the next one, and it's for me part of the process of being self-aware is when I'm thinking, when emotions or thoughts or feelings or whatever come into my head, then my brain starts thinking of ways to express those. Not always, you know, sometimes it's just too much, but my brain starts thinking how to express those things creatively. And so I think it's not only, for me at least, not only the act of sitting here and doing this, but also the thinking about how can I creatively express those thoughts or feelings or emotions. I hope that makes some sense to some of you. And it would be, yeah, I would love to hear if any of you are the same with that, you know. When I stitch the pieces, I have to make sure I can do this in the right order now. Back together with gold. I have to put Of My Soul back in the middle there somewhere. And I stitch the pieces of my soul back together with gold. So something like that, I think. So of course I need to ink them to make them stand out. The doll is probably now dry, but I'll put her in last as a finishing touch. Excuse me. So I'll ink these and stick them on, and then I'll be back in no time at all to put the dolly in the pocket. Okay, all stuck on. I have written the author's name at the bottom here, Najwa Zebian. Also, you know, to credit her. I mean, I've shown you the book and I've credited her, but even if it was a journal that I wasn't showing or sharing, I think it's nice in future. You might forget where it comes from and want to go back and look it up. So that's why I do that as well. So where's my little doll? So we have the doll to go in the pocket. Hope she fits. Might have to just help her in with a pinny. And I could leave her like that. So there's the 2 lines of rick-rack. I think that's quite nice. Or I could push her right in. I think I'll leave her like that. So she's peeping out of the pocket. So inspired by the story of the Vasilisa from the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, or Estes, I've also heard it said. And my words: from the ashes I rose, and I stitched the pieces of my soul back together with gold, from the Book of Healing by Najwa Zebian. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I must say it's been quite a long process. I've been most of the day working on that and coming and going, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I hope you can see it all. Sorry for the chair. Yeah, you can see it all. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more self-care journaling. Bye bye.